Everybody, welcome to chapter 1. This will be our first chapter, obviously, the beginning of the lecture videos. So as we go along, you will get to kind of see the slides, obviously, hear my voice, hear my anecdotal jokes or stories or clarification. So just follow along. In each chapter, there are a variety of what I refer to as written reflections. So you want to take note of these written reflections, jot down your answers when we get to them, and then you will submit all the written reflections for the whole chapter together as one discussion post. Okay, so let's get right into it. Maybe. There we go. Each chapter, you're going to have a set of objectives. So for this first chapter, we are going to define psychology. We're going to identify some misconceptions about psychology. We will look at the 4 goals of doing psychological research, outline the steps of the scientific method, and look at kind of the difference between predictive and causal hypotheses. We'll look at both advantages and disadvantages of a variety of research methods that are used by scientists and psychologists. You will be able to understand kind of the main ethical principles that guide psychologists in conducting research, so the code of ethics. You'll be able to distinguish among the 7 modern perspectives of psychology and kind of look at the eclectic approach, as well as identifying kind of the major players behind those approaches. You will understand how a psychologist is trained compared to other specialties or other professions. And then finally, we'll get to how women and minorities have contributed to the field of psychology. So section 1.1 is called What is Psychology? I think a lot of people believe that psychology is just about therapy, right? But it's actually so much more broad. Psychology is about how we perceive things, how we think, why we behave the certain way, why we are sing in the shower, but we won't sing on stage, so a variety of things of how people interact, how we think about ourselves, self-esteem, what motivates us, why we have certain feelings or emotions, attraction, positivity. So there's so much more to psychology than just therapy, right? It's not just therapy. That's one aspect, treating mental health disorders, but there are so many others. So you'll see as we go through these chapters, we're going to kind of pick apart all the different areas of psychology. Okay, so the word itself is actually a combination of 2 Greek words, psyche and logos. So psyche is kind of loosely translated by the Greeks as the soul. The Greeks use the word soul, but really kind of a modern version is what we mean by the mind or our spirit. Okay, so and then ology, of course, we see ologies all the time, biology, anthropology. That just means the study of. So psychology, the word is translated as the study of the mind. Contemporary definitions or modern definitions, we kind of refine it a little bit to be the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So psychologists are scientists and they use the scientific method when conducting research. So the goal here is that hopefully this class will help you kind of understand how psychology is a science and how the results of psychological research throughout the years and even current research that's going on can apply to the real world and how it applies to your life. Because nobody is going to be able to go through their life without interacting with people, right? So psychology is really kind of understanding how you think, how you see the world, how others see the world, and what makes people do the things they do. So sometimes there's some misconceptions about kind of psychological things. So first of all, psychologists typically hold a doctorate degree in psychology, and they have conducted scientific research. So a PhD, and I actually have a PhD in neuroscience. So I actually conducted research of how the brain works. We attempt to... My watch was trying to talk, sorry. Ooh, that's fun. Okay, we try to use theories to explain. So we collect data, we develop ideas about why this is working. So we use theories as a way to explain how or why people behave the way they do. Some of the common misconceptions that I've heard and, in the field of psychology or particularly neuroscience, like, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. Really? So if I cut out 90% of your brain, it would still work? Probably not. Opposites attract. I'm sure you've heard that one. Well, is it? Do they really? Like, is there some evidence to suggest that? Does science say something different? So not all observations are scientific. So science kind of is different from everyday observations. And scientific observations use reliability, predictability, and we try to remove bias. Okay. So sometimes people kind of just make observations like, oh, opposites attract, for instance. Like, well, why do you say that? Well, what evidence do you have? So that's kind of called pseudo-psychology, those everyday observations that people who are not trained and who do not actually use the scientific method may make some statement. And let's be honest, you guys, all of us right now, are inundated with information. And we are required to try to determine if this information is valid, accurate, like, well, it's on the internet, it must be true. Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. So it's really important that we can understand and identify what is actually scientific evidence and not just somebody's random, post on social media. So I want for all of you to become critical thinkers. I want you to think when people are making these statements to you, whether it's in person or online, what is really going on here? Okay. And so I want you to kind of ask these 5 questions. So first of all, what am I being asked to accept or believe? What are they trying to convince me of exactly? What evidence do they have that supports this? Is it, oh, I saw it on the internet, or, oh, I saw this one time, or I read an article, but I can't remember where. Like, where's the evidence? Okay. Are there any other ways the evidence could be interpreted? Okay, yeah, maybe it said opposites attract, but did it really mean on everything? Did it like what other information do I need to evaluate these alternatives? Maybe it can be interpreted differently, or maybe you're not telling me part of the story. What are you leaving out? And then finally, what is the most reasonable conclusion, right? Sometimes common sense is not so common, right? So is this reasonable? If you hear hooves, the sound of hooves in Central Park, and someone's trying to convince you it's a zebra, should you believe it? Like, well, other animals have hooves too, and there's lots of horses that go through Central Park, right? Little horse-drawn carriage. So you want to kind of ask those questions whenever you feel like someone is trying to influence what you're thinking or what you believe. We have made it to our first written reflection. So at this time, please jot down your answers. Again, you will turn in all the written reflections together in one discussion post for this chapter. Your first discussion or your first written reflection should include the following. So maybe before enrolling in this class, you thought that psychology was easy major, or that psychology is just about helping people therapy, or that research and statistics aren't really a necessary part of it. So first question is, why do you think these misconceptions about psychology are so common? Why do you think people don't think it's research? Why do you think they just think it's therapy? What steps can be taken to reduce these misconceptions? And then finally, how can we as psychologists better share what the study of psychology is truly about? So make sure you jot down the answers to those to turn in as your one big discussion post.